Hi there. My name is Pouya Jahanshahi. I'm an associate professor of graphic design and graduate program coordinator at Oklahoma State University. Um, Happy to be here on this great event and wonderful timing and wonderful collection of panels. Just a few words about my perspectives of the community approach and design. As most of you would probably agree that one of the challenging areas in graphic design and academia has been the transference of knowledge and practices developed in academic environments and classrooms over to the community sphere, and kind of an on-the-ground presence and the fruition of those knowledges and theories in a way that it can actually influence kind of human lives. And needless to say, this is an area that's sort of really high importance during the time and place we live in. The world is facing challenges across the spectrum, whether it's global warming, economic, health, racism, and others. So during this past week, my interactions with Rich Holland and his unique approach towards community engagement and design, it has brought forth a unique understanding of the process-based approach that he has put together and proven time and time again, and a community engagement kind of reality that can come forth if we go through that process. It has been quite an interesting understanding. I look forward for the AIGA Shift community to be exposed to this knowledge and the ongoing communication and conversation that we're going to have, and an eventual development of a collective community accord that we're going to be working on today. So I look forward to moving forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Mueller. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Advertising at Temple University in Philadelphia. I'm also the 2019 recipient of the Design Incubation Educator Award for Service. I received that award for a 7-year body of pro bono work for a nonprofit organization, Cocktails Against Cancer. I'm pleased to be here today to help facilitate this roundtable discussion. Thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Rich Hollant. I am the founder of Collab. We are an organization that works on branding and communications in the social space. And I'm also the founder of Free Center. That's a nonprofit that helps provide access, particularly in underserved communities, to help create vibrancy in communities and to help address the power dynamics that happen around equity issues. And lastly, and germane to this conversation, I am a co-teacher of a interdisciplinary MFA class called Nomad, out of University of Hartford, and we'll talk about that a little bit further on in our process. Right now, I'm going to throw the mic to Zoe, partner of mine in these endeavors, who will introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Zoe Chatfield. I am the project manager at Collab, and then I'm also the organization-wide director at Free Center, and the co-teacher for the Nomad class that we're going to be talking about. And we're ready to go on to introduce Kathy and Pouya, who will also be helping to facilitate this roundtable discussion.
Hi, folks. So in preparation for the work that we're going to be doing together around developing design a common accord, we want to share some of the insights and perspectives we've garnered through running a class for an interdisciplinary MFA program called Nomad out of the University of Hartford Art School. This curriculum takes students through nomadic learning experiences in a number of countries and introduces them to practitioners in situ, right? So it's folks who are working in the field and specifically going to, to the place where they practice to learn about, how they do what they do and why they do it. The leg that we teach is up here in Hartford, where the home campus, so to speak. And our course is called Wonder in Crisis, Ethics at the Intersection of Creativity and Community. And it's grown out of the work that Zoe and I do in community, the work that we do that brings design thinking, arts and culture, and community engagement and community organizing all together in one spot, looking to create more and more access for communities and for residents of the city that we love.
So this course is an intensive 3-day-long course, or 4 days if you count this first part here. So we actually start the course out with a day that's dedicated to a social equity workshop. We've done this twice now, and we'll be doing it again in September. The first time around, we did it with not only the class, but with faculty and administration from the University of Hartford and from the program itself, including the dean. So this was a really great opportunity to kind of start framing the next 3 days of the course in terms of thinking about social equity and the ways that we interact with communities and cultures that we both come from and enter into. And it was also a great way to start building an understanding of where the individuals in the class were coming from and how to build a more equitable environment within their micro community of a graduate school program.
On our second day, after we set that table for folks, where they think of community not just as the art that we place in, the interventions that we get to do as artists, but also in terms of our role and responsibility in crafting the policies and and in a large part the culture of the communities in which we operate. We then moved into a couple of days of real intensive studies. For example, on day 2, we were considering our roles in community as individuals and as artists. A lot of the work that we've been doing through this program has been about understanding the role of the personal in community spaces. So how does the personal come up? How does this personal extend? And how does the personal come together collectively for the greater good of community? And there are a lot of assumptions and presumptions that need to be addressed and dismantled as we start looking at that. So in our second day, we took a look at a couple of leaders, a couple of ideas that are similar and contrasting. So we took a look at Grace Lee Boggs to demonstrate, and took a look at her demonstration of activism on the home turf and how it can grow from a local to a broader system without losing the personal. And we took a look at a project that we've done called Portraits from a Place of Grace. It's using art as a pretense for community organizing in these 14 historically targeted African-American neighborhoods in Virginia. We got to talk about shared personal approaches and demonstrating a mechanism for activism in a community that isn't necessarily your own primary community. So we're taking a look at how we can enter into a community with an intent to support that community that isn't ours, and how we can do that without helicoptering, with leaving the community with actions and ideas that they can move forward with on their own, independent of our ongoing interventions. And as a piece of homework, we sent everybody home to watch For Akeem. It's a brilliant movie where documentary filmmaker pointed his lens in a direction in this underserved community, in this place where, in a Black community that was getting really walloped by this disenfranchising inequity, and noted that just by virtue of pointing your lens in a certain direction and opening it up, the degree to which all of what we hear about in the news and what we talk about as systemic issues play out. Everything from the school to prison pipeline to issues around gender equality, you name it, it all played out in this video just by virtue of looking.
This was a packed day. So there were a few different things that were going on here. We looked specifically at activism on the local level, both within and outside of the system. So I'll start with talking about that. We met with Wildelise Bermudez, who is a Hartford City Councilwoman, to get a sense of the work that she does within the municipal government. And she continues to be a very active voice for community change. And she was able to talk about her experience herself as somebody who started out as, has done work as a community member, an activist outside of the city structures, and then also within the mayor's office and within those structures. And then we also met with Constanza Segovia, who is the founder of Veo Veo Design, and she is an artist and an activist, and she continues to do work that puts pressure on systemic issues as somebody who is outside those systems. And it was really important to see those contrasting but equally important ways that you interact with creating social change and with the system, whether it's the local level or if you're looking at broader issues on a national or a global stage. And then we also delved more into the role of art in identifying social issues and creating social change. So with Pedro Bermudez, who is actually the brother of Wildelise and a local filmmaker, he reviewed with the class some elements of the documentary for Akeem, including the idea of just the way that you portray something and the way that you put your literal lens to life in front of you impacts the interpretation of what's happening. And it's really important as both a literal and figurative lesson in how we take our own lenses to the spaces that we enter into, and the way that we want to create change and activism is shaped by that initial lens. And then lastly, we looked at design more specifically and the role that design has played or has grown and evolved to play a role in social change and social planning. We talked to Emily Norton, who is the head of the Design Thinking Initiative at Smith College, and she talked about some projects that she's been a part of in kind of taking the design thinking approach to community planning and community engagement. And then we also gave all the students their own equity-centered community design field guide, which is something that Creative Reaction Lab has produced and has a lot of really thoughtful visuals and explanations for how to think about the ways that the systems we are in and take part of and seek to change are designed and can therefore be redesigned.
So as you can see that day 3 was really packed. It was packed with ideas that were simpatico in a lot of ways. And it's also packed with ideas that contrasted and, and that delved into aspects of this work that's really necessary. I do want to point out that one of the truly beautiful moments was when Constanza Segovia reminded us all of the importance of rest, of slowing down and healing ourselves so that we could do this work. And frankly, I think that is a piece that I find to be often missing in the discussion about doing community work and about, design and art and community. There's this assumption that we are an endless resource of capacity, that we are nothing but an idea, but really at the underneath it all, we're human beings acting together with all the needs and the supports that and fragility that human beings have. Moving into day 4, we took a deep dive into the role of creativity as a lens on community. So as you can see, this coursework has continually been building on that. We reference lens a tremendous amount, and because I think, and we reference things like, what's personal, what's community, and we do that with kind of intentionality to grow an awareness of where we stand and from where we speak. On this day, we took a look at contrasts within one person. We took a look at the work of Pablo Delano. We were in the midst of designing this, this sort of large book, compendium of Pablo's images that he's shot for the past 30 years of the architecture of Hartford, and noting that even without seeing the people, that the people were the power in all of these images, that the people were the ones that transformed the city based on the needs of the people. And seeing that play out over decades was a powerful experience for the students. We literally laid out the book on the floor in Free Center so that folks could walk around and pick up things and have conversations about the contrasts that existed between two images on a spread. And Pablo just basically leaned on a wall and watched everybody walk through this barely annotated visual text, and suddenly over time get it, have the switch flipped, where they could see it, where they could see where the influence and the power truly is in a city environment. And that to me is the beauty of art, and the power of doing visual storytelling. By contrast, we took a look at the Museum of the Old Colony, which is an installation piece that Pablo has created, where he collected old postcards from his native Puerto Rico that showed this sort of exploitative tourism and objects from the old colony that are still alive and and germane today, in the culture and the mentality of colonization. And he crafted those as though you were walking through this museum that at one point celebrates the notion of the old colony as a historical museum might, but at the same point, through juxtaposition and scale, refutes and challenges and forms a strong critique of colonization as not just an artifact of how we come together as people, but as a warning of our propensity to come together and in the spirit of oppression and in the spirit of denial of the humanity of others. In the context of these sort of rich conversations around what is community, what is culture, and what is our role of art, as of artists committed to supporting shifts of power, we stepped back and did reflections with the students and helped them further craft their own sense of ethics, and to review the work they had presupposed they would be doing as they headed into this coursework, and took a look at how their understanding of that work has changed over just literally a number of days of exposure to what is instead of, what we hope is. So they all left with this new vision of their work and their role in community, and in a really clear understanding of how they're going to work together as a community that has the potential to shape the culture of their academic environment as well. So that was our course. That was the leg that we placed. Now, mind you, that this is a setup in a lot of ways, right? It's set up in helping to give the students who are part of this control of that lens as they walk into these other environments in other countries, in other communities, where they can sharpen their grasp on the aperture and the depth of field that they're looking at things through. This document that we're going to be working on together, this accord, is talking about work in the community space. We thought that it would be really important to take a look at, certainly in the context of the course that we were teaching, how we create an operational definition of community. And one of the ways that we find of doing that is to take a look at the contrast between community and culture.
Part of our initial framing for the course when we reviewed social equity was to do a deep dive into definitions both of community and of culture, and separating those two things so that we can better understand how they interact with each other and how we interact with each of those things. So for culture, we have just some of the definitions up here, with it being a customary set of beliefs, social norms, and values that can characterize a group of people, whether it is geographically specific community and institution and organization, or a community that is connected by a different set of traits, whether it's racial or religious, etc. So that is the kind of framing for how to think about culture and the various cultures that we come from and are entering into, including an academic culture, which is an important thing to keep in mind as students and as teachers and as administrators, and what those norms of an academic culture value, and who may have access and familiarity with those norms, and that the fact that some people do not have that same relationship with that culture that they're entering into.
By soft contrast, there's this idea of community. Community we're looking at as a unified body of individuals, right? So while culture goes into these longstanding historical ways from which we speak, community ends up being the canvas where we speak. So the definitions here are kind of worth reviewing. Community is the people with common interests living in a particular area. So it's defining the space itself of community. So think in terms of region and geography, et cetera. Blocks. It's a group of people with a common characteristic or interest in living together within a larger society. A body of persons of common and or professional interests. So there's the design community, there's the academic community, for a couple of examples. And those tend to be scattered throughout society. They're not, organized and centralized like a neighborhood. And a body of persons or nations having a common history or common social, economic, and political interests, which is another one of the more familiar ways of talking about community. So the important thing about those two worth noting are the contrasts that we see here. And these are some of the prompts that we present to our course. So with what cultures and communities do you identify, right? So getting really clear, about where their identity stems from culture and where it stems from community itself. How do we impact from where we speak? How do we relate to the academic community that we're a part of? How has it been navigated? How has it been navigating an academic culture from where you speak? So, and with the program itself as their community, how can we cultivate a productive culture within that community? So we are intentionally using the language of culture and community, so that we could recognize the stuff that's deeply internal, so we could recognize the relationship to the personal, and so that we could recognize the canvas on which we have effect. So the culture affects the policies of the community. When we move the culture, the impact on the community changes. The profile of the community changes. Yet there are environmental effects that could happen on a community that could have detrimental effects on the cultures that live within that community, that exist within that community. To us, when we're talking about community, these definitions are mostly what we're looking at, with the recognition that there is some overlap between culture and community.
So with that set up for this specific roundtable discussion, and with the prompts that we've put together for the breakout sessions, we want to start thinking specifically about this micro community and the culture that it has for design educators and design education. Identifying what defines this community, what are the cultural norms within it, and then thinking about the fact that each of us as individuals do not just exist in a vacuum with this one community and this one culture. So thinking about the various cultures that we are a part of and that we bring to this space, as well as the various communities that we come from, and with that, the one that we're entering into as the design education community.
Loosely speaking, today's goals are to do some info sharing around building this accord. We want to learn what your experience has been working at the intersection of design or creativity and community. And then we're going to do some confirmations of our shared universe. So where do we already have shared observations and shared experiences? And let's validate those and lift those up. We'll be then building an accord and ratifying the accord. Now, if you're looking at the time thus far, you're recognizing that our allotted time is just no way that's going to get us through all this. We're anticipating that the ratifying of the accord is certainly something that's going to happen later. We'll create some some Slack connections and ways for all of us to come together and continue to build this work and build these ideas. These asterisks that you see at the end are what we really expect, the extent to which we'll get work done. We're hoping that we get all of the info sharing done so that we could drop all of our insights into one place. And then as much as we could in the breakout groups that we'll be in, do some confirmations of the shared universe, that would be great, but let's really focus on the info share and then move into these others. If folks have the ability to start talking about what the framing of accord would look like, that would be great. We're really not anticipating that you're going to get that far, because the richness of these two segments there's a lot of content in there that we don't imagine that we'll fully be able to capture in the time that we've got. So with that framing, I'm going to flip this to Kathy, who's going to go into more detail about how we're going to run the next bit of our work together in our breakout rooms.